Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. For the great people of northern British Columbia, calculating the economic impact of the Wet'suwet'en pipeline protests is just another exercise in a long, treacherous battle with radical environmentalists hell-bent on destroying the resource economy. And the battle has taken its toll. What the protesters want is to level, and not just level the playing field, but to level results. To achieve leveling, activists thwart multi-billion-dollar resource projects through obstinacy and militancy. They strangle resource development at the local level, destroying family and community throughout. Joining us today on RegWatch to discuss the impact of these protests is Dave Johnston, founder of the North Matters, a pro-resources grassroots advocacy group that promotes unity and action in solidarity with BC's resource citizens. Dave, thanks for coming on RegWatch.
I really appreciate you having me on today, Brent.
Well, we're speaking to you live from Kitimat in northern BC, which is certainly a part of the epicenter of all the resource troubles in the province. Most of our viewers already know there was a breakthrough in the talks today between the Wet'suwet'en and provincial and federal negotiators. Before we jump into what we know about these developments today, please introduce our viewers to what your group is and why it exists.
So the North Matters is a group of grassroots citizens that we started in Kitimat, and it basically started with this group of citizens who all had the same concerns. And we met through different avenues like social media and out in the community doing volunteer work. And we decided to start a volunteer group because we heard there were a lot of different issues going on with LNG Canada in getting their project over the finish line. So all these local citizens here were in favor of the project. We wanted to see a strong future for our children and our children's children. So we started this group to stand up for responsible resource development in our community. And what it's turned into, when we first started, we built a mission statement because we did want to include surrounding communities. So our mission statement is building strength in northern communities by aligning and creating opportunities for its residents. And what it's turned into now is we've been approached by multiple communities across northern BC asking how they can be involved, and so we're starting to set up groups in these other communities. And everybody's coming in under the banner, the North Matters, but they have complete autonomy in their own community to fight for the opportunities that they're fighting for, but also be connected to the network.
And the autonomy, that obviously is critical, certainly in this particular issue. Let's jump over here to the computer to have a quick look. We're gonna play a little bit of sound that we've got here from today. So this is reported by Global. Proposed agreement reached between Wet'suwet'en chiefs, government ministers after 3 days of talks. And that's been closed-door talks that have been going on. And as Global writes, a proposed agreement on land rights and title has been reached between Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs and government ministers, bringing 3 long days of negotiations in northern BC to an end and tentatively solving a long-standing dispute over the First Nations traditional territory, which we'll discuss in a little more detail in a second, Dave. Yet the forward-looking, quote, arrangement, close quote, announced by the chiefs, Federal Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett and her BC counterpart, Scott Fraser, does not apply to the Coastal GasLink pipeline, meaning the contentious project is still going ahead as planned for now. And let's listen to what Minister Bennett had to say just a few hours ago following the end of talks.
Denise Sakase, we want to thank Denise Boss and really all the Denise Sakase Sake people. This has been a real learning. Wagoose is about respect. the Yinta, and it is about making sure, as Chief Was said, that this never happens again. That the rights holders and will always be at the table, and that is the way through for Canada. If we continue to move on what the Prime Minister has said on the recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership, and that's the way forward.
So, and that's the way forward. We'll also take a listen to, before we start talking about this, Dave, we'll also take a listen to what Indigenous Relations Minister Scott Fraser said from the BC provincial government too as well, and this is also a part of today.
An interesting and powerful 3 days for myself, and I know for all of us. It's been It was an interesting and powerful 3 days for myself, and I know for all of us. It's been 23 years, it's been mentioned, since the Delgamuukw-Gisdaywa decision, and there has been little or no progress towards recognizing the rights and title of the Wet'suwet'en people since that time. And in 3 days, I've never seen a more productive and respectful table that has moved us to an arrangement that it will go to the Wet'suwet'en people to review and decide to endorse, I hope, and that'll move us forward in a way to bring certainty, clarity for the Wet'suwet'en people and for all British Columbians, and it's well overdue.
Outline what is in that proposed agreement, what you can tell us about it.
I'm going to say straight up, the nation needs to see it first.
Can you tell us then what it means to come tomorrow? The expectation was Coastal GasLink was going to go back to work. So does this mean no more work on the pipeline till everybody gets to go over what you've looked at? What happens to that?
I think that's in Minister Fraser will answer that, because that's his area.
Yeah, thank you. And as you know, the RCMP made a concession while we were doing this work. So did Coastal GasLink to stay out and not work during our time. And I want to thank all those who have made those the space and the time and to allow us to do this respectful work known as WIGOOS. It's called Respect. And my understanding is that our work for this moment has been done. They are permitted and allowed to go ahead to work. I do not know their exact plans, but that would be a question, I believe, for Coastal GasLink.
Chief, are you happy with what's happened over the past 3 days?
Overall, I did express with great intensity and great compassion to both ministers, well, all ministers that were with us for the past 3 days. And the degree of satisfaction is not that what we expected, but at the same time we're looking at the other avenues, and we'll see where that brings us. As most people and everybody knows, that the trust factor is what we've expressed all along, and the respect that that all parties need to show. So our work really boiled down to describing and looking at WIGOOS, which is respect, and and that was a starting point. Once that is achieved, then people are able to understand what we're talking about as Wet'suwet'en people. So yeah, for the past 3 days, that's where we left things just basically at the respectful level.
So, Dave, there you go. I think we missed a little bit of the audio there for Carolyn Bennett, but we got the gist of it. She had said that they have an arrangement, it's a milestone, and they're following the protocols of the Wet'suwet'en. So, after hearing this, What do you think?
Well, I think the only conclusion, myself being not being Wet'suwet'en, the only conclusion I can draw from this, since we don't have information on the details of what this agreement entails and that it'll be discussed within the Wet'suwet'en Nation between the clans, I think that from what I can judge from that, it seems like it is a very positive thing, a very positive step forward. Up until this point, it seems as if there's been one group from the Wet'suwet'en who have been going at this alone, and nobody else's voice has been covered or talked about.
How do you mean by that?
So,
Do you mean other First Nations, or do you mean other Canadians?
no, I mean Wet'suwet'en members within the nation seem to have been muzzled from getting their point out. You know, whether they support it or not. It seems it's gone both ways, where the media seems to just roll with one narrative or one group. And so the fact that these chiefs are now including the entire nation in this discussion and going and getting their opinion on whatever this agreement says, to me is a positive thing, because it really does start with that dialogue within the nation without any outside influence. So to me, that's a positive step out of this. It, again, you know, I'd really like to see what the agreement says, because from my understanding, the Delgamuukw case, the case law, if you read through it, it talks about borders and overlapping land claims, and it did establish that the Wet'suwet'en have this ancestral land has not been ceded, and it is their rights and title to that land, but they have to establish the borders and the overlapping land claims with other nations around them. So, you know, that lies with the court to decide that, with the Canadian Supreme Court. So yeah, again, I'm interested to see what this agreement says, but it is up to the Wet'suwet'en to make that determination within their own nation without any outside influence. So I think we'll see with the media, with all these protests going on across Canada and shutting down our economy and all these hashtags shut down Canada, I think we're going to really see what this has really been all about, because as this interview with Chief Woos just said, they're going back into their nation to speak amongst each other, and they've reached this agreement. So if these protests continue talking about the hereditary chiefs, what that will tell us is that this was never about these hereditary chiefs. This is about something completely different.
How do you mean?
Well, as you see, the chiefs have come to an agreement, and they're going to talk to their nation members about that. So that right there should say, you know, all these protests should stop now. You know, just like Coastal GasLink stopped, the RCMP stopped to give them time to talk about this. They have come to an agreement. I think it's time for all these extremists and people that are breaking the law across Canada to also stop and give this nation some time to heal and heal amongst each other and talk amongst each other and not be involved and not stick their hands into it. I mean, there's a lot of these groups who are fundraising for themselves on behalf of the Wet'suwet'en Nation, when we don't even understand how many of them support it and how many don't support it. So, you know, there's a lot for that nation to work out for themselves, and they need that space from all this negative attention and all this anarchy going on across the country. They need that space to come together and amongst themselves and heal and heal what's been torn apart and ripped apart in their community.
So, Dave, let me ask you about that. You've mentioned, you know, extremists. There's certainly a ton of radical activism that goes on in the environmental area. Up there in the north, it's not just been this one issue. There's been a litany for decades, if not more, of action like this. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, is this really likely to end? I mean, how could it end? I mean, as all revolutionaries will say, it's never about the issue, it's always about the revolution.
I don't know. It's being someone who's done a lot of research into this and spent a lot of time looking into it and reading up on a lot of other people's research who they've donated dozens of hours of their own time, if not hundreds of hours of their own time, looking into these things. This all seems very targeted and regional, and we have even government officials up here. Our member of parliament in this riding, he was one of 7 federal candidates in the election who was supported and campaigned for by a U.S. funded group called Lead Now. And there's been a lot of research into this group called Lead Now, and it turns out their parent company is a group out of the U.S., and that's how they started in Canada. And they campaigned hard for this candidate in our riding who ended up winning. And before he got into politics, he was part of all these groups who seemed to be targeting this region to shut down all of our resource projects. He was part of Sierra Club. He was part of Dogwood Foundation. He was involved with Pembina Institute. He's been with all these different groups. I've seen pictures of him with West Coast Environmental Law. And now he's a decision maker, a lawmaker for our riding in Ottawa, and he's been silent on this whole issue. There's been no leadership locally for us. So, it kind of makes you wonder, where is this all coming from? And why is this region targeted? I mean, if you look at the Lower Mainland, they're a resource-built city. They're a resource community. They were built on resources. And it's our turn now in the north to have those same opportunities, but it seems like we're being targeted.
What's been the economic impact so far? When we talked, obviously covering this issue, it's just, you just got to shake your head and go, how many projects have been lost over the decades, certainly in the last 10, 15 years. And then with the tech announcement, I know that's Alberta, but I mean, we're talking about Canada's resource sector here. I mean, how much has been lost?
Well, you can't calculate it based on potential investment into this region that got turned away because of the instability and uncertainty of building a project here. But what we do know is we were really close to having an LNG export facility built in Prince Rupert, and they had a lot of support. I would almost say overwhelming support, but the silent or the loud minority seemed to get all the attention of media and government, and the silent majority just stood back and let it happen. And that could be a contributing factor to why people in our community wanted to volunteer, stand up and start getting involved, because we didn't want to see the same thing happening to the LNG Canada project.
So when you say silent majority, I mean, is it apathy or is it fear?
I think it's a little bit of fear. There are intimidation tactics are one of the main tactics that these extreme, and let's just get one thing clear, there are a lot of environmental groups out there that do good things. But there are a lot out there based out of, whether it be Vancouver or other major cities, who seem to not actually do any physical work when it comes to, improving fish returns in rivers or doing bird counts. And my brother's a biologist, and he works for a consulting company, and they consult for industry. So he's worked on windmill projects where he has to do bird migration studies. And there's a lot of groups out there that do really good things to help protect our environment, and they are typically going to be more local. But we have a lot of these outside groups based in city centers who come into our communities with the intention of just shutting down proposed projects with no other explanation other than just blanket statements, that, it's going to destroy the water, it's going to destroy the air, but they don't have any substantial, they just stir up emotions and try to get people to react emotionally, which causes division and causes polarization and brings all these negative effects into our communities. But we don't want that.
Well, I would imagine not. No, it seems though that is part of the desired effect, right? When you look at, if you always work backwards, if you don't know the reasons why something is happening, but you look at what the effects are, then you can surmise backwards. And so I would say that this is planned disruption of the local communities, of people's homes, of their lifestyles, of their sense of security.
Yeah, exactly. And down in Vancouver, if a project gets shut down, it's okay because there's 10 dozen other ones. In the north here, the opportunities are limited. Between it's a 6-hour drive for us here in Kitimat to drive to Prince George. In between there, we have Houston, Burns Lake, Smithers, and Terrace are the only main centers. And you're looking at 2 hours between each community, so it's very sparse up here. And if you've never been up to the north, when you're driving between these communities, there's nothing there. Typically you're not going to have cell phone coverage, and all you see is trees, rivers, so all this talk about the environmental devastation and all these coin phrase words to make it seem bigger than it is. The wilderness is vast up here. When I look out my window, I see a few houses, but then I just see never-ending mountains and trees.
So, Dave, obviously the local impact is critical, extremely important. But these projects, though, by not going ahead, they affect the entire country. I mean, we see that, as I said in our lead, this is all about leveling. That is what the radical environmentalists actually have a particular point of view. It's one that is vehemently anti-capitalism. They're anti-free market. They want to destroy the foundations of our economic system, and that's what you do. You go after resources. That's how you do it. And if the end goal is leveling, which they continually talk about, which is what it is, they seem to forget that in the history of the known world, there's never been a case when you can level a group of people up. Government, organizations, parties, that kind of thing. You can't swoop into an area and level up. It just doesn't work. The only way you can level is by leveling down. And leveling down means taking away opportunity, taking away wealth, taking all that stuff away from the top to crush the top down. And when I look at what's going on in Canada, I see a deliberate process at the national and international level to level Canada, remove Canada's prosperity, remove its wealth, remove its opportunity to get wealth through its natural resources, and to remove hope from Canadians that they can do anything about it.
Yeah, and looking at it from that point of view, who are the victims in this game? It's the average citizen. It's It's your neighbor. It's people that are trying to. It's hard enough as it is, especially in the north, to survive and put food on the table because of the lack of opportunities, because of the weather. There's a lot of challenges up here, and the victims of this game that these extreme environmentalists are playing are all the community members. And that's what we're trying to get out, that the information that they're putting out, in the most part, is disinformation. So, we've had the Wilderness Committee send, and they've sent these flyers, and they're just propaganda flyers, up to every house in Kitimat. They've mailed them out. I don't know how they get so much money to do this kind of stuff, but they sent out these propaganda flyers that was just riddled with disinformation about fracking and pipelines and LNG carriers. It was just riddled with disinformation. And that's what they do. They try to mislead the public and lie and deceive the public to get whatever political outcome that they're trying to get. And we need people to start waking up and realizing what's happening, and that they're being deceived. They're being duped. They're being taken advantage of. People that get behind these types of groups, they're being lied to, and they need to start realizing that. And they need to realize that, they need to start looking out for their neighbors. They need to start looking out for their family and friends, not backing these groups that are furthering the benefit of other countries. When these industries divest from Canada, they're going to another country to do the exact same thing. But in most cases, they're not doing it as well as we do, and they're not taking as good care of the environment as we do.
Yeah, we're just showing here a little bit of they're trying to hire some new canvassers. I would sure like to be in the back room of one of these training sessions. I'm sure it's quite militant.
And there's a lot of things going on right now with these groups. Tides Foundation is one of those organizations out of the U.S. that was founded in San Francisco that funds a lot of these groups. We had a presentation for the Senate Committee in Terrace on Bill C-48. We had one of these groups, local groups here, admit publicly, it's on public record, that over 70% of their funding comes from the U.S. And they see nothing wrong with that. But if they're not doing what makes those groups happy who are funding them, they're obviously not going to get that money anymore. So they have to keep the same narrative and keep doing kind of what the funders want them to do in order to keep that money coming in, rolling in.
Sure. Let's just have a listen here. I haven't listened to this yet, but it's the CEO here of Tides. It looks like it's just a short 2 minutes. Let's roll the dice here and see if we can get some interesting sound from this. 1 second.
Sure.
We live in a time of, I think, enormous challenges, but equally enormous opportunities.
Investing in social change isn't about taking a safe bet on what worked in the past. It's about making a bold, risky bet on what just might work in the future.
We all have comfort zones. Individuals have them, communities have them. It's the easiest place to stay, but real change rarely comes from those circumstances.
A smart risk taker actually has the courage to say, hey, things are not working. Who would we not partner with to do something that has never been seen before, or things that we thought were impossible?
We can't afford lethargy. We can't afford not taking bold actions at this time, and Tides represents a real departure from the mindset that we need to just tinker around at the margins.
Effective social change requires innovation, it requires scaling, and it requires collaboration.
The people who partner with Tides are really the risk takers of the philanthropic sector.
We're ready for change now, and we're going to use whatever tools and communities we can to get there faster.
We've been doing this for 40 years. I think it's given us an incredibly unique perspective on social transformation.
We have impact solutions as diverse as the problems that we want to solve. We have a place for everyone.
That is the benefit of working with an organization that has the breadth of resources, the length of experience, and the passion for change that Tides has.
Sometimes in the world of social change, people who want to see you do bold things are not the same people that want to make sure you have all your I's dotted and all your T's crossed. At Tides, you can find both.
So if anybody hasn't figured it out yet, change is the porn word here. Well, hold on.
Yeah, social change.
Social change. Yeah, exactly. Let's let them finish up here.
That combination of expertise as well as embracing the boldness that we need is really what makes a difference.
It's more than just lip service to us. We really partner with you at the heart and the spirit level of what you're trying to do.
You have to challenge yourself to embrace risk and dare to create change.
To push boundaries.
To build a world of shared prosperity and social justice.
When you're talking about needing to move fast, when you want to work with a partner who gets it, you come to Tides.
So I think, it's really important to bring this up, Dave, on our side here at RegWatch, is that when you hear that kind of language, that's not just, nicely Pablum corporate or social justice speak, because it didn't seem too radical. It's extremely radical.
They make it sound like a Disney movie.
Yeah, that's what makes it so dangerous. Now, Tides US, they said they've been around for 40 years, and that is absolutely true. In their early days, within the very first years of their starting in the early 80s, they actually funded the satellite uplink to the Kremlin when during all the pressure on President Reagan and in '84 in the whole the whole battle over nuclear power and nuclear weapons. So, these guys have been in it in the start, and it's been radical the whole time. And they're an actual bundler for other progressive groups. So all these other progressive groups funnel money into them, and then they take that and then they manage it out. So I've got a couple of other thoughts on that, but I'm going to pass it to you first here to get your feedback.
Yeah, it's scary to me that they just opened up an office in Williams Lake. They just opened a brand new office and hired someone. I think they're paying them $70,000 or $80,000 a year, and it's not quite clear what they're doing. But I think what they were talking about is the local First Nations community there. They would act as a liaison and work with the local First Nations community. So it's another infiltration tactic, in my opinion. To use First Nations for whatever it is that they're trying to do. They're trying to take down our way of life and our society. And that's kind of what they just said, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah. And bold change, bold, risky change. And the thing is that these people, Canada is primarily made of these kinds of people. And in their mind, there's only one kind of change, and that's radical change. And the radical change that needs to happen is always tomorrow, because whatever radical change happened yesterday matters no longer and was never right. These guys have been running change now for about 140 years. All of Canada's history as a country have been run by these progressives, whether they're progressives on the left or progressives on the right. And, despite what everybody says on the left when they try to dispel the fact that, say, progressive conservatives aren't really progressive. Yes, they are. They're progressives cross over both, and those progressives in the Conservative Party are fellow travelers of progressivism.
So I'm just going to stop you right there and pull it back a little bit, because I might agree with you, but we're probably going to lose a lot of people on this. So my thinking behind this is... Well,
wait a minute. Why would we lose people from that kind of a conversation?
Well, it might be going a little bit too deep into it. And, that's kind of why we started The North Matters, is because we want to show people exactly how easy it is and what they can do to actually start standing up for the communities and fighting back against these, I'll say, radicals that want to destroy our way of life.
But it's not just U.S. radicals, Dave. It's Canadian radicals. It's our own citizens, our own fellow neighbors.
Right. So cutting through all the disinformation and the Disney-like presentations, that's kind of what we want to do. But we want to give people the opportunity to make a stand in their community and make a stand for their kids and their kids' kids, of being able to stand up to this disinformation that's being fed into their community and stand up and say, no, that's wrong. You know, we're going to stand up and we're going to call this out. We're going to make a presentation to our municipal council. We're going to write an op-ed. We're going to put on an information event, local community information event, and feed people lunch or dinner and do a presentation to show them what's going on with certain things in their community. And I think what we were touching on at first is it all does start with resources. We are a resource-rich country, and our resource industries are under attack. And we're seeing that daily with the focus on the coast. If you're able to set up what was being attempted in Alberta was the Bighorn land use agreement, if you're able to set something like that up, it cuts off access for pipelines. That didn't work in Alberta. So now what's happening in BC is the exact same thing. They just call it something different. It might be caribou, it might be, beavers or whatever it might be. Look at it as a bigger picture. Look at it from an aerial point of view on a map, and it's strategic. It's trying to shut off any access for pipelines to the coast. At the same time, it's shutting down forestry industries' permitted land. It's shutting down opportunities for mining. It's shutting down all these different industries, agriculture, ranching. It's shutting it all down.
Well, and I think that's the point I'm trying to make by just bringing in some of the ideology. It's because, this thing is metastasized to just shutting down, a Run a River dam or something like that. I mean, we're at the part here now where nobody could credibly say that you could build any project of scale in Canada. Mm-hmm. That is like, we're going to turn into Venezuela here.
Yeah, or worse. And, I have to shake my head when I hear the types of solutions from these groups that are trying to shut everything down. That we need to expand our tourism industry and we can survive off tourism. Well, I would challenge you to show me one country in the world that relies solely on tourism that isn't a third world country.
Right. And, and let me just bring up, because, I appreciate the position that you're in and your organization is in, and so many inside, the resource community, you can't really afford to take the attitude that I've got. That's why I'm here, is to start saying these things, because you don't own change. Progressives own change, and they own change in a manner in which only their kind of change counts. And it has to be radical, and it's always continuing. And it's always designed to make every single person a better person, and the country better, and and make social better. And so you can't make that happen, right?
Yeah, and the best way to track this and understand what's going on is it moves from one campaign to another, and it's all the same groups involved. So if you look at the Bill C-48, Bill C-69, it was all these groups were focusing 100% attention on that. But at the same time, they're so advanced over the last 35 years in their strategy and ways to infiltrate into government and into First Nations communities and hold them down in poverty and run with policies in government that hurt our communities. If you look at, actually a perfect example, a colleague of mine, Steve Simons, during the C-48 hearing in Terrace, he was sitting beside the CEO of Skeena Wild when he admitted that over 70% of their funding comes from the US and he has no problem with that. But Steve actually predicted in that, and you can see it in the Senate records, he predicted what's next after C-48. You know, they're talking about crude oil, shipping crude oil, and they're trying to shut that down. But what comes next? What Steve said is, are they going to come after LNG next? And as we've seen, all these same groups involved have shifted to LNG, and they're all going after this LNG CGL pipeline right now. So if you go scroll down to where Steve was talking.
How far down do you want me to go here?
It's after the introduction. So
I didn't highlight it, so I didn't get a chance to do that.
Yeah,
Hi, my name is Steve Simons.
This is where he starts. This is his introduction. Okay. But if you scroll down.
Okay, there we go, C-48. And we're just looking for the U.S. We're looking for...
Okay, here you go. So, Mr. Simon... Oh, stop for a sec.
Okay.
Mr. Simons, oh sure, if previous anti-development campaigns are any indication of what we can expect going forward, then we can expect these activist organizations to turn their efforts towards LNG shipping next. And that's a concern for the community. Wow. So we were talking about this, this was back in April, last April. And now we've seen that happen. So, you know, it's very easy to see what's coming next. So what I'm saying right now, I feel is coming next is focus on these land use proposals in the interior. Williams Lake, Revelstoke, up north in Fort Nelson. And if you look at what it's all about, it's all tied to the Y2Y initiative. And all these groups are getting behind that.
What is that? What is that, Dave?
The Y2Y initiative is basically a massive swath of BC from Yellowstone to Yukon that they're trying to get turned into a park. So there's no recreational activity, there's no economic activity, there's no resource activity. It's shut down, and it's strictly a park. And that's the initiative that we need to keep an eye on now.
So let's jump back here for a moment to the Wet'suwet'en issue. I've got some numbers here right now from our people that give us dossiers too, just like, you know, Putin. So I had to. Russia. Anyhow, so this is Tides Canada, and this is just a look at some of the money that they've been giving to the Wet'suwet'en over the last couple of years. So just under $200,000. That's a drop in the bucket of the amount of money that's been funneled into the militant campaign that's been going on to destroy Canada's resource economy.
Mm-hmm.
In your mind, how much money do you think overall, to say, guess, how much money has come in, spent to kill our economy?
Oh, hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions. If you look at Vivian Krause's research, which I've looked really deep into, you know, there's a lot of people out there trying to discredit her too. But you know, when you look at what she's put together, it's all it is tax returns. She's found these tax returns and she's showing what they say. It's, you know, not a conspiracy. It's money that's coming in to these organizations to shut down, and it says it right on the tax returns, to shut down these projects. And she's dug up hundreds of millions of dollars that has come into BC alone to shut down these projects. And then Alberta is like a whole nother story too. That's right. You know, the Corp Ethics tar sands campaign that was a deliberate attempt, and things that we're seeing now are hangovers off of that. shutting down Northern Enbridge, that was all part of the tar sands campaign. CGL now is a hangover from the tar sands campaign.
Yeah, the tar sands campaign, I've got that right up here, actually, to show people. Just a little
is that
bit
before they scrubbed it, where they show what the purpose of the tar sands campaign is?
You know what? It probably is before, because I've had this document for a while.
Okay.
And I haven't checked because it was only just yesterday that I found out that they had scrubbed it. But I don't think they've got it up anymore, because when I did go to corporate ethics site, I didn't even see that you could download it anymore. So I mean, I'd have to check.
What they did was Vivian Krause got interviewed by Wendy Mosley on CBC, the National, and they showed, what the tar sands campaign was all about. And it says,
well, basically, theory of change. See, it's always change.
Yeah.
Our goal is to mitigate the harms associated with existing tar sands production, achieve a moratorium on new tar sands operations, and use this issue to speed the enactment of U.S. and Canadian federal energy legislation that preempts the demand for future tar sands oil and ensures we meet and exceed the IPCC carbon targets for 2050. So the potential to break the chain for delivery of vital inputs to tar sands operations, the legal potential to block vital links in the tar sands oil delivery infrastructure, the potential costs to the industry associated with mitigation and legal fights, the fact that Barack Obama, the potential next president, has criticized tar sands oil, and the growing potential for national carbon legislation that preempts tar sands oil. And that's why they were optimistic. And literally, I mean, when you talk about the disinformation campaign, it's laid out in this report. I'll throw this up on RegWatch. I've been waiting for a good episode for us to do that, for us to release it. And I'll get this up on RegWatch so they can have it. So, but raising the negatives, U.S. and Canadian government officials and oil industry spokespersons have aggressively promoted tar sands as the solution for, quote, energy security and independence, unquote. Like, that's a bad thing. These people are mentally ill. They're mentally ill.
So what it says in the, for the purpose of the tar sands campaign, right in there is, since day one, the entire purpose was to landlock Alberta oil so that it couldn't reach international market and fetch a higher price. And as soon as Vivian was interviewed on the National with Wendy Mosley, they changed that. They took that whole section out, and they said the whole purpose of the campaign is to educate the public on the effects of tar sands on the environment.
Well, so, I'll have to go through this again in a little more detail to see if this is the scrubbed version or not. It definitely, you know what's so interesting, right, is it talks about the coordination between U.S. and between the U.S. and Canadian activists, talks about sharing resources and how to do that, and all of the strategy in between. Anyhow, I mean, clearly for the group of people who like to get all their, buns in a knot over foreign influence in, say, the U.S. political election when they don't even live in the U.S., they should be really concerned about this kind of influence in Canada. And because really they're taking the decision-making ability away from Canadians by supporting this kind of misinformation, for the lack of a better word.
Yeah, and they've, like I say, if you want to look into this for yourself, just look at the different campaigns. So right now it's the CGL Pipeline, and it was all about the hereditary chiefs. But now that the hereditary chiefs are speaking with their community and trying to heal their community and give people in their community a voice that they haven't had for so long, and that's happening right now. If this other stuff continues, we understand that it's not about the hereditary chiefs. There's a bigger issue here. There's a bigger thing going on. And I guarantee you all those groups who are involved in it, Sierra Club, Wilderness Committee, West Coast Environmental Law, Canadian Center for Policy Alternatives, all these different groups who are involved in this right now and weighing in and sticking their nose in and fundraising for their own gain. Watch what happens when that campaign dies down. Watch where they all go, because they'll all go to the next thing. And that's my prediction, is it's the land use stuff in the interior.
Let me ask you, Dave, with regards to the politics behind all of this, to the extent that you can comment on how the federal and provincial governments have been handling this, and specifically our Prime Minister, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I could speak to all of that. It doesn't represent the North Matters. It represents my own personal views, but the North Matters is nonpartisan, and we try to stay away from the politics of everything and focus on policy for our communities, what policies are going to best build up and help and sustain our communities. But my own personal view is that there's been a complete departure from leadership in our country. You're just not seeing any kind of leadership. Lawlessness and, a small handful of people seems to be running the country right now.
And what about the, issue with RCMP getting forced, out of the lands as a part of the bargaining tactics?
Well, that's scary too. We're a country of the rule of law, and the BC Supreme Court served an injunction and for this company that has crossed all its T's and dotted all its I's and had support of all 20 First Nations, all municipal elected officials, all provincial elected officials, all federal elected officials. It had support from everyone that represents the nation. And it seems, a few people who oppose it are now the talk of every single local, provincial, federal media outlet. And for the RCMP to have to leave from doing their job, which is uphold the rule of law in our country, speaks volumes to the lack of leadership.
I don't know how that doesn't unwind. How does that not unwind the country to some extent?
It's a scary thing. It's a really scary thing. If we're gonna show on the international stage, which this has now gotten to, if we're gonna show that we're a country of lawlessness, and the first post-national state is that, I think when Justin Trudeau first got in, he said the first post-national state, and now a country of lawlessness. I don't know where it's going. It's scary.
Yeah, well, but I'm always suspicious that things are unfolding as planned.
Like I say, looking in my region, things seem very targeted and very well coordinated. So looking into that a little bit further might surprise you and make you think, whoa, there's something bigger going on here that I don't know about.
Absolutely. So we're mindful of everyone's time. We're getting close. We got a couple of more questions to go through. What I want to do is I want to bring us back into kind of the nitty gritty here a little bit. And this is about the actual ruling in 1997. And the pronunciation on this is always hard. Thank you for giving me a little bit of hand with it, but I don't think I'm going to get it right. Delgamuukw, right? Delgamuukw? Yeah. So amid the backdrop of nationwide protests, blockades and arrests, Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs on the front lines of the fight to stop a pipeline in their traditional territories are pointing to a Supreme Court case from the 1990s that underscores their authority over the land. The decision in the Delgamuukw versus British Columbia was delivered on December 11th, 1997, acknowledging Aboriginal land title and setting a precedent for how it is understood in Canadian courts. So how Aboriginal land title is going to be understood in Canadian courts. Quote, the Supreme Court established that the Wet'suwet'en had never extinguished title to our territories, close quote. Within Western law, they have acknowledged that we still have title to our territories, and this is an issue about title. So Dave, let me throw that to you right now. You live up there, but we're all Canadians. And that sounds like to me that all Crown land is now First Nations land. And if they don't want us using it in certain ways, or feel that we haven't properly consulted and then accommodated them, then they'll unleash their colleagues across the country and shut down Canada's national transportation system. and cause hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of economic damage and billions when you see stuff like, the Tech Mine pulling the plug and all of the other projects. So is that really where the state that we're in now is, that there are two classes of citizens and one has right to that property and the others don't?
No, I think that the process right now of reconciliation has gone in the completely wrong direction. We are all one people in the world. We're all connected, and we need to treat each other with the love and respect that we would expect back. And when it comes to the land titles, it is true, and our Canadian Supreme Court did recognize it in Delgamuukw, that they haven't given up rights to their traditional territory, and by all means it is their traditional territory. But just like our Supreme Court recognizing that, and we as all Canadians should recognize that, it's a piece of history. But true reconciliation is working together and sharing what we have for the betterment of our communities and the healing of our society and our neighbors and our friends. We need to start learning how to work together and stop grandstanding on different claims or different racial positions, or any of these types of positions. It should just be dropped. We need to start talking about healing. This is a nation that we're talking about, the Wet'suwet'en Nation, that's torn apart, and there's a lot of people that are at fault for that. There's the government, there's these Angos, there's industry, there's locals, there's a lot of different people. But what needs to happen for true reconciliation to start happening is the conversation needs to change.
So let me just bring up my last of the strong pieces here at you, and then we'll close up with some of the what we're doing about it kind of thing. Reconciliation. That word is, they say that reconciliation is dead. That's the militant argument, is reconciliation is dead. And it may very well be so, because it appears to me that reconciliation moves to retaliation or retribution or revenge. All of the R words long past reconciliation. It's really retribution. And that's what makes it very difficult to understand how to connect here. Like, are just cuddly words going to be enough to figure this problem out?
No, definitely not. Working side by side is a start. And we're seeing that with these ministers, whether we agree with what's going on or not. Just the fact that they're going face to face and sitting down and discussing with these hereditary chiefs, who in turn are going back to their nation and starting that healing process amongst themselves, is a really positive sign of one of those types of steps that needs to happen. So I would love to see a lot more of that going on. That helps. What we're doing, of course, is what I was talking about, building strength by aligning and creating opportunities, is bringing people together in communities and then bringing all those communities together. So we've started very small. We started in a very small group, and we've managed to spread out now with the message that we're trying to spread. And it's not been us trying to force it on people. It's been people asking us to come and make these presentations and talk about these things, including members of the Wet'suwet'en Nation who asked if they can come and help us out with some stuff we were doing. And then they started learning more about what we're doing, and they got the strength to start speaking up in their community without that fear of lateral violence, because that's what we're trying to do, is create a safe place for people that can start speaking to unity and understanding and loving one another.
And we're just showing some of the pictures here of some of your events. Just talk us through these last shots that we've got here. How can people help?
So the best thing you can do is start talking to people in your community about these topics. I know it's something that not everybody wants to talk about. It is political in a sense. It's something that really most people's eyes just glaze over when you start talking about this stuff. But people need to start understanding and realize how important this is to our way of life, and that wars aren't fought in the battlefield anymore. Don't get this mixed up. This is a war. This is an economic war against our country. And our way of life is going to crumble pretty fast if we let it continue simmering. So what you can do is you can start getting involved in your community by talking to people, finding like-minded people, going and do presentations to council, writing op-eds, speaking to your local leaders, and asking them questions about things that are happening and about opportunities that could potentially be coming to your community. And how can you do something to stand up and try to make that opportunity a reality in your community. The key here is communication. And when you start talking to other community leaders and elected leaders and start getting a bigger picture of what's going on with your community, you can really start affecting change by doing these simple little things.
And important things too, no doubt. I mean, you've got to do the nice, pretty little words. We just need an army somewhere on this side that can start, fight. Where is it? I mean, we don't have that in Victoria, and we don't have that in Ottawa. I mean, I think Alberta's got some of that, no doubt. But this is frustrating because it really, and I totally get it. Maybe we're crying crocodile tears because the one side that, is benefiting from these rulings and so forth, have a lot of grievance that is valid. There's no doubt valid, right? But that doesn't discount the rest of Canadians having no say at all. So this 3 days of chatting has happened. The federal and provincial governments have obviously clearly given up something because they shut down Canada's National Transportation Network. So they're going to get something to open that up. And what say does the rest of Canada get in that? Nothing. So our say was just a minority government. That was it. Like that's our entire say.
Yeah, it's really hard to say what's going on, but that's why we're not focusing on partisan politics. We're focusing on policies in our individual communities that are going to start building up our communities. It's our turn in the north to reap in the benefits of our resources. Vancouver's done that already. They've already established themselves and built that up, where now they have universities and they have top grade medical facilities, and they have all these things that resources brought them. And it's our turn up in the north now. And the only way I can see us doing that is for standing up for these policies and stop getting into the partisan stuff and the division and polarization, and bring everyone in. Everyone in the community should want the same policies. They want the best for the environment. They want the top-notch social programs, and they want opportunities for their kids. So why can't we talk about just those things? And figure out which policies are going to get us there, and push for those policies in our community.
Well, that's fantastic, Dave. So your website has been up under your name key the whole time, but it's thenorthmatters.org, correct?
That's correct.
Great. Well, I highly encourage everybody to go check it out. It's always great when a grassroots organization like yours jumps into the fray, and God bless you trying to keep it nonpartisan. It's always tough. Just
It's especially tough to do when it's all volunteers.
Oh, true. Absolutely.
like all these people that have been putting in all this time and traveling out to different events, you know, I have to truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank them, because, you know, we're all doing this on a volunteer basis. So for me to go to these people and be like, hey, you know, we don't have any money to pay for anything, but would you be interested in getting involved in this? And then they do, and they put in all this effort. I mean, that's community. That's what it's all about. That's, you know, that's what standing up and fighting for your community is all about.
Well, that's just excellent. And if you got money out there, go check out Dave and the North Matters.
Yeah, we have a donate button up, and we've gotten $100 so far. So if anybody wants to chip in on our website, that would be great.
That's great. Well, thanks again, Dave. Just stay right there. Well, that's it for this edition of RegWatch. Before you head off, please go over to support.regulatorwatch.com. That's support.regulatorwatch.com, and consider making a financial contribution to our coverage. It's easy. Just dig into your wallet and find a few dollars and then toss them our way. You'll be happy you did it, and so will we. And while online, don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. For regulatorwatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford.